joining you today. Of course, we have a lot in store for you, and let's start straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines, and we move to the latest developments in the region of Kidal, where linked Qaeda terrorists rocketed the French military bases in Kidal, Menaka and Gao in northern Mali within the space of a few hours late on Monday, a rare sign of coordinated raids on the international forces there. We have more details in this story.
Militants linked to Al-Qaeda have fired rockets at 3 military bases in northern Mali in what is a rare coordinated attack on foreign forces. French military bases in Kidal, Menaka and Goua were hit, although no deaths or injuries were reported by officials. A spokesman said the UN base in Kidal was damaged. Earlier this month, French forces killed Ba Al Moussa, a military leader of Mali's most prominent group known as JNIM. France has more than 5,000 troops in the Sahel. Despite international efforts, violence has steadily spread from Mali across the region.
Moving to Ethiopia, where the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed lauded his troops on Monday for ousting a rebellious northern movement, but the leader of the Tigrayan forces said they were still resisting amid fears of a protracted guerrilla conflict. The nearly month-long war has killed hundreds and probably thousands of people and sent thousands of refugees into Sudan. We have the details.
The Tigray People's Liberation Front TPLF politicians in Ethiopia's Tigray region said they have released more than 4,000 soldiers who had been held captive. The officials said that they had been part of the Army's Northern Command but were detained when Tigrayan troops attacked a federal military base. Earlier on Monday, Ethiopia's Prime Minister declared that the military had won the conflict, but the Tigray politicians said they are fighting on. Before the war started, the military had troops in the northern Ethiopia who were from different regions of the country. But when the Tigrayan fighters suddenly attacked the main base triggering the war, thousands of non-Tigrayans suddenly found themselves in what was enemy territory. They were detained by the TPLF but have now been freed. State media in Addis Ababa confirmed that at least 3,000 soldiers had been released. It reported that some were Tigrayans who had refused to fight.
And for our final item, the Somali government said on Monday it has recalled its ambassador to Kenya, citing political and economic meddling in an apparent diplomatic spat between the two neighboring countries. We have the details in the story.
Somalia ordered the expulsion of Kenya's ambassador after accusing neighboring Kenya of interfering in the electoral process in Jubaland, one of Somalia's 5 semi-autonomous states. Somalia also recalled its ambassador from Nairobi. The Somali Foreign Ministry said that as a result of the Kenyan government's political interference in the internal affairs of the Somali, the regional president of Jubaland has reneged on the election agreement that was reached on 17th of September 2020 in Mogadishu. The statement did not elaborate on the interference or the agreement the Jubaland president had reigned on. This is not the first time there has been tension between Mogadishu and Nairobi. Last year, Kenya recalled its ambassador after Mogadishu decided to auction oil and gas exploration blocks at the center of the maritime territorial dispute. The two countries restored ties a few months later. Kenya contributes troops to Somali as part of an African Union-led peacekeeping force, which, along with the Somali federal government and local states, is fighting in Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab insurgency.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency Ambassador Mohammad Higazi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. It's a very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, sir, for joining us.
How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Right, Mr. Ambassador, the Institute for Economics and Peace said Africa has suffered $13 billion of economic losses because of terrorism. Such a big figure in just 1 year. Why, in your opinion, Mr. Ambassador, is the continent struggling to control the issue of terrorism?
Well, as you know, terrorism is the enemy of development.
Yes.
Egypt has indicated very clearly during her presidency, and before that, and even till now, we are pursuing terrorism not only in Egypt but all over the world. It hits everywhere, and also it is a threat to Africa well-being and development. So if we are to confront illegal immigration, for example, we have to create opportunities. Those terrorism is against development. We cannot really assert Africa back to the future. So what we have tried to do is to call the international community to play its role and to confront illegal immigration through a developmental project, through allowing Africans to confront their differences and internal wars and activities like terrorism, which push people either to displacement or illegal immigration. So the number you have noted rightly is the product of this continuation of lack of international support to Africa drive to confront terrorism and misunderstanding of the root causes of illegal immigration and displacement in Africa. You know,
Yes.
that terrorism prevailing in one region drives its people to be displaced or
Yes.
to illegally immigrate. So the solution is to is concerted effort to confront terrorism.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, again, which countries do you believe suffer more from the issue of terrorism, and which, in your opinion, have improved or managed to improve a bit its security to eliminate this issue of terrorism in their countries?
Well, the second is Egypt. Of course, Egypt has successfully confronted terrorism with resolve, and we will continue to eradicate this blood from our territory. But the country most affected, the first part of your question, is the countries of the Sahel region. Of course, the Sahel is suffering continuously from the activities of terrorism and illegal militias. We have noticed in the past 2 days the very commended efforts of the Libyan National Army, who confronted militias and groups in the southern part of the country, the southern western part of the country. And this is very important step. But as you know, the Sahel region situation is alarming. Of course, France is playing a role, and different international powers are trying to help, but we need really a concerted effort where everybody should help the Sahel region to attain its goals in eradicating terrorism.
Mr. Ambassador, let's talk a bit about the role of the United Nations peacekeeping forces in enhancing peace and security in the African continent. How effective do you see them as being?
It is very effective. It is very important. It has played a very important role in with the African Union, of course, with the African Union effort. We have maintained peace in many parts of Africa.
Yes.
Egypt has been one of the most contributors and most important parties to the UN operations in Africa. As you may have followed, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was in southern Sudan, where Egypt also has contributed largely in the formation and action of the UN-led forces in southern Sudan. So I think this is very important role. The multilateralism is key. The UN role has to be always welcomed and recommended.
Let's talk a bit about the Egyptian roadmap. Egypt has presented a roadmap to a more stable Africa, which has been really approved last month by the AU's Peace and Security Council. Tell me a bit about this roadmap and how it has been built from the Egyptian experience in creating more security in Egypt.
As you have followed the Egyptian example, has acquired many lessons to move further in confronting terrorism in stabilizing the region. As you have noticed, our role in Libya is commended by the international community and was the key to launch the political process that we are following today in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Geneva, in Egypt itself. The role of Egypt to pacify certain conflictive parties in Africa is important. The situation in southern Sudan was supported by Egypt. Now even the reconciliation between the government in Sudan and the rebel forces are supported and negotiated in many parts by Egypt. And I'm sure that this extends not only to Africa. This role, I mean, of Egypt pacifying the regional complex is part of our agenda, part of Egypt drive during its presidency to the African Union, where silencing the gun initiative have received great support from a very active leadership in Egypt, along with the other leaders in Africa.
Indeed. Now, one of the major threats facing the African continent, Mr. Ambassador, is the transfer of foreign mercenaries, as of course noted by the UN. How do you think this phenomenon can be halted, and how can African states work or collaborate to stop this problem?
Whoever is financing mercenaries like those in Western Libya, like Turkey, has to be stopped by the international community. It is not an act of defending national interest. It is an act of aggression on different international soil. So demarcation of the maritime borders with countries that has no border, being maritime or land, is against international law. Financing mercenaries is also another crime because this is leads to destroy the nation state, and we have seen that in many parts of the world, not only in Africa, and Libya is the last example that we all have a role to play.
Absolutely. Mr. Ambassador, do you have any estimates about the numbers of foreign fighters recruited or mercenaries transferred to Africa over the last few years, especially as the Daesh terrorists, for example, were a very recent example of a major transfer of these fighters into the African continent?
I think the most recent and obvious example is Libya, moving 17,000 mercenaries from Syria to Libya is a threat to the national unity, is a threat to the that hamper the political process, and definitely this has to be stopped from the central, I mean from the international community. We cannot leave one country, which we can name, driving force militias from one theater to another, from Syria to Libya, without being really punished or stopped.
One of the Cairo Roadmap recommendations that was submitted is to establish an African force to combat terrorism. What are your thoughts on this, and how would an African force differ if it were to be established?
The most important about uniting certain African troops to confront terrorism, though it might look to me a bit difficult, but it shows a concerted will, a unified and comprehensive approach to the problem. I think if we done that, we are complementing the role of the African peacekeeping forces, which should be financed and supported by international community, because African economies cannot really carry the responsibility of peacekeeping, which is very expensive, as it will require a lot of logistics and finance. So it carries responsibility that is put on the shoulders of the Security Council. Yes. So if Africa will to take its responsibilities, it has to be supported. The second is the overall coordination that will require international expertise. But Africa and regional groupings like the SADC or the ECOWAS have played a role in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Nigeria was a leading force in this drive. So regional economic zones can be also regional security zones where ECOWAS, East Africa, and Southern Africa can play together. And the African Union, Peace and Security Council, has also an important role. Egypt will continue proposing initiatives, and we welcome any initiative that is welcomed by other African countries to the end of stabilizing the African region, as well as we are doing that with the Arab brothers and in North Africa.
Yes, absolutely. One final question, if I may, Mr. Ambassador. One of the recommendations was also to give women a wider role in preserving peace and security in Africa. How do you see women working in this area? What can they do specifically, and how can this be promoted in different African nations?
I studied in Africa and I lived in Africa for years, and the role of the African women in all domains is very important in commerce and trade, even in the history of certain Western African nations. Women were patriots, were combating troops. They are always with us, and they are the ones who carries the pain and the price paid by any local communities. It is women, the mother, the sister, the daughter, who carry all the pain of displacement, of illegal immigration, of war. They are the ones who protect the family, who are displaced, who are immigrating, who are really fall victims of terrorism or conflicts or any other reasons of displacement, even from a natural cause like drought and lack of water that drives the family out of their homeland. And that is why we have in Africa 28 million displaced, and women are very important part of the problem and the solution. And we carry also the same seal of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in calling African women to continue carrying their noble responsibility.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Mr. Ambassador Mohammed Higazi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you, sir, of course, for joining us this afternoon and for your insight. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up today's edition of Africa Today. We do hope you have enjoyed it. My name is Angie Meher. Thank you for watching.